I recognized that something was wrong and I was bleeding profusely. I told the RN that was attending me 3 different times, listen, this isn't right. I'm losing a tremendous amount of blood. But I grabbed the nurse's hand and I said, promise me you're not going to let me die. I awakened from what felt like a deep, dreamless state, embraced, ensconced in perfect peace. And the angel that was accompanying me said, these are particles of light, and you were being cleansed and prepared for heaven. It was magnificent. It was magnificent. My name is Rosemary Thornton, and I have had an unusual and profound near-death experience that I'd like to share. I actually don't call it a near-death experience. I call it a temporary death experience because I didn't come close to death. I actually crossed over and came back. And my story is a little bit different because there was a profound healing involved in it. I guess the story starts with me meeting my husband in about 2006. We got married soon thereafter, and he seemed like the love of my life. I was absolutely besotted with this man. And we were married a little less than 10 years, and one day he came home for lunch, and he ended his life at our home. And I lost my mind. It was too much for a sensitive soul and an empathic individual. And I didn't know where to go or what to do. I was flailing. I was lost at sea. And what was kind of interesting is all of our friends scattered to the 4 winds. And the people that came rushing in from the sidelines were the people that had been on the periphery of my life. They what you might call just average folks. But they did. They swarmed in and saved me. One woman, her name was Tracy, she actually had me move into her home so she could keep an eye on me. I had stopped eating and I had lost about 35 pounds. I physically couldn't swallow food. She took care of me for 4 months. And then there came a day when I realized it was time to move out. 4 months is a lot to have somebody living in your back bedroom who awakens the household at night with screaming. But she was one of many people that provided great solace and comfort as I moved through this experience. One of the things that Tracy did that is profound is she worked as a real estate agent. She worked a lot of horrible long hours, and I was sleeping in the spare bedroom. And she said she would come in to check on me at night, and I would be writhing and crying in my sleep and rolling around in the bed and carrying on. I had a lot of nightmares during this time. And Tracy would stand at the foot of the bed and pray for me. And she would ask God to wrap his arms around me, take care of me, protect me, give me a feeling of safety. And she said invariably, even though it appeared that you were in a sleep and in the middle of a bad dream, she said the writhing would stop, the crying would stop, and you would settle into a deep peace, and your breathing, the normal breathing, would return. I had a lot of people in my life that were surrounding me in love and prayer and just practical things like holding my hand when I had freakouts, and there were a lot of panic attacks and freakouts. So 2.5 years passed this way, with me being in a miserable state. And something that I have often said is I felt like a 21st century leper. People didn't know what to say to me, what to do with me. They just didn't want to be around me. I would often joke that I should just walk down the street yelling, unclean, unclean, leper, unclean. And I get a lot of email from people, and I'm grateful for every letter. I've gotten probably over 10,000 emails in the last year. But a recurring theme is people who have been through severe traumas say that's exactly it. You feel like a 21st century leper. So I guess one of my messages, if you find somebody who's been through a severe, debilitating trauma, don't keep your distance. Nobody knows what to say. But just showing up and being a loving presence is everything. You know, people tend to say, what can I do for you? Or if there's anything I can do, let me help. The better thing to say is, can I bring you a casserole Thursday night? You're looking pretty thin. That's a better way to go at this. Or can I go grocery shopping for you? Just give me a list. Or can I come babysit for you? But don't say, what can I do for you? I had 3 prayers that I prayed pretty much every day. Number 1 was, heal me or let me go. I knew I couldn't survive very long like this. And this was not living. I was just trying to slog through the days, and it was a long slog every day. The second one, I asked God, no more hard decisions. These decisions, the decisions that have to be made after a loved one passes on, are mind-boggling, and there were a bunch of them. And my third prayer was, I knew that when people had near-death experiences and came back, they talked about a life review. And I had been a huge fan of learning about NDEs. I thought they were fascinating. Started with Raymond Moody's book in 1976, his little trade paperback, Life After Life, and pretty much everything that came out since then. So I knew there'd be a life review, and I pleaded with God, when this is over, spare me the life review. I don't want to see myself like this again. Getting through this once was hellish enough. I don't want to see it again. I don't want to go through this again. So these were my 3 prayers, and then came a day when I started having some very disturbing physical symptoms. I went to a doctor. It was a gynecological problems, and the doctor diagnosed cancer. So then I got referred to an oncologist, and the oncologist did an exam, and he said, yes, you have cancer at stage 2. It's already started to spread to other places. So I was given a surgical biopsy, which is an operation. I mean, they knock you out and take flesh from different pieces and parts, and then hopefully you wake up. Well, after I awakened from this procedure, I recognized that something was wrong, and I was bleeding profusely. I told the RN that was attending me 3 different times, listen, this isn't right. I'm losing a tremendous amount of blood. And all she would say is, oh, you're fine, you're fine. This is typical. And I said, no, I'm 59 years old. I've been in possession of this body for almost 6 decades, and this is not normal. But they sent me home. Big hospital on the East Coast. They sent me home. Well, when I got home, things got much worse, as those things tend to do. Having some pretty severe bleeding, I thought to myself, this is my way out. I didn't do this to myself. I even sought medical care, and look what's happening. So I thought to myself, all I have to do is sit down in this shower, and I'm out of here. And now somebody will find me in a couple minutes, and that'll be that. Nothing can be done at that point. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that so much because I was tired. I was tired of being a leper. I was tired of being lonely. I was tired of being alone. I was tired of not enjoying food. I mean, people would cook my favorite foods for me, and I'd eat one bite, and I'd say, I just can't eat anymore. But then I thought about all the things the kind people had done. A woman who took me into her home, and a friend who had stayed with me. So many people had rushed into the fray to save my life. And I don't know why. Not that important. I'm not that interesting. But they saw something in me they thought was worth saving. Maybe it was just my being a fellow human being. And I thought about that in that shower, of all the people who'd done so many things to keep me here. And I thought about my daughters. And I thought, I guess I have to try to keep living. So I did not sit down in that shower. I stepped out, wrapped a towel around myself, got kind of sort of dressed. I walked out to my living room, and I told my friend, call 911, I'm bleeding to death. And what's funny is I thought they'd say, oh, you're going to be fine. They did not. They called 911. Ambulance came. They got me out the front door. They took me to a nearby hospital. It was actually not a hospital. It was an ER, a standalone ER without a hospital attached to it. And at the ER, they made a few more mistakes, and they did not take me seriously. The doctor came in to examine me, and a nurse was there. After examining me, they put a blood pressure cuff on me, and I was pretty frightened at this point because I had made a decision to live. And I knew I was dying, but I grabbed the nurse's hand, and I said, promise me you're not going to let me die. And she looked at me, and she was very motherly. She was definitely in the right career. And she said, oh, honey, we're not going to let you die. We have many solutions for this. And I could tell she wasn't just saying that. She meant it. I was not going to die on her watch. And it was very comforting. But then they made a little boo-boo, and they gave me a morphine derivative right into the veins. And that was not a good thing for somebody whose blood pressure's dropping. And that knocked me out. And they left the room. My friend who was sitting there observing, he said my blood pressure went down to 32/25. And he said he knew that I was dying at that point, because that doesn't really sustain life. And he got up to get the nurse, and then the next blood pressure reading was error, which means it's less than 32/25. And he said, you hear the expression white as a sheet, and you don't think of what that really looks like in the human form, but he said, you were. And so he rushed to get the nurse. He's rushing to get the nurse, and then she realized that I apparently had passed, and she did what they call a sternal rub. She took her fist and rubs the knuckles across my chest, and allegedly it elicits a pain response, so that if there's any life in you, you'll twitch or something. And my friend said, you didn't move. And it was pretty easy to see you had left this world. And he said the nurse screamed for the doctor, and the doctor said, I'll be there in a minute. And the nurse said no. And then the doctor came and they pushed him out. And then he said the next thing, seconds later, a crash cart came flying around the corner and into my little cubicle. But meanwhile, I awakened from what felt like a deep, dreamless state, being catapulted out of my body, and I mean catapulted out. I had this impression that it was as though there was a silver sinewy band from the crown of my head to the heel of my foot, and somebody had pulled it back like an archer's bow and released it, and when that pop hit my back, that's when I went flying out of the body. It was magnificent. It was magnificent. I thought, wow, this is a wild ride. And it was right on the cusp of being a little scary, but it wasn't. It was wonderful. So I'm flying through this blackness, and I was puzzled by the blackness because I thought, should there be wildflowers and heavenly music? But I got the blackness, which I've since learned is very common. They call it the void or something. But in this blackness, I was like massaged, embraced, ensconced in perfect peace. And I thought about that Bible verse, the peace that passeth all understanding shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. I thought, that is what Paul was talking about. This peace, you cannot describe what this peace feel like. And it was like it infused everything that I am. And my first thought in this new experience, that I was loving it. I mean, I was not like, oh, I guess that earth experience has ended. I was like, I spent years since 1976 reading about this stuff, and now it's happening. And I also remember thinking, I always wondered how this would end. And I thought, kind of funny, it ended with a medical mistake, but oh well, here we are. My very first thought was, my heart has stopped. And I thought, how do I know that? I thought, I don't know how I know that, but I know that's right. My heart has stopped. And then my very next thought was, actually, you're not dying. You're dead. And I thought, wow, I don't have breath sounds, and I don't have the accoutrements by which we produce and hear sound. I don't have lungs. I don't think I have ears. I don't think I have all those things that go with talking and hearing. And yet I sound just like I sounded, before I left the body. And I thought, I also still have a macabre sense of humor, a weird way of looking at things. All those things went with me. And I thought, so what did I leave behind on that gurney? And I thought, anxiety, worries, recrimination, regret, self-contempt. I had a lot of guilt over my husband's ending. As I'm floating away, and I'm thinking, everything I really am has made this transition. So, again, early on in this experience, I can't tell you how much peace it gave me to know that not Rosemary, but the person, the being that I am, had made this transition. And again, almost instantly, I felt the presence of a very large being. And this annoys people, but it was a feminine presence, was much taller than me, to my left, and slightly behind me. And I'm in blackness. I can't see anything. Pitch blackness. And yet again, it's full of peace. Oh my gosh. It's living peace. Peace is not a static thing. Peace is living. Peace is a vibrant, living essence. And that's what was infusing me, was this peace. And as somebody who suffered anxiety their whole life, I was so grateful for that. A lot of people talk about the love. And I'm not diminishing that, but for me, peace was what I most need. But I feel this presence. I look up and over to my left and I say, and who are you? Because I'm like, hey, everything's great now. Everything's great. Everything is great the second I got out of that round insane asylum we call Earth, And the being, before I could even finish the question, and who are you? the being said without words, again, the being took this message and just forced it into my soul, I guess. It was very pleasant, but said, "You are the image and likeness. I'm the original." And I thought, wow, that's Genesis 1:26 and 27. We're made in the image and likeness of God. And I thought, I've studied that my whole life, and I never really knew what it meant. Now I get it. There's an original. We can't be an image and likeness unless it's an original. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. That's so great. I've always wondered. That's fantastic. I could sum up this whole thing in 3 words, and it would be welcome home, dearie. And I was home. These were my people. This was my tribe. And one of them said to me, "This was a hard one, wasn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, this was a hard one." And they said, "But you're home now. And we're so proud of you. And we're so glad to see you." And I was welcomed with so much love. And it was like a reset almost that I don't know how to describe it. It felt like every one of those 59 years was a hard slog. And yet when I awakened from this, when I died, it felt like waking up. It felt like waking up from a very intense dream. And suddenly those 59 years seemed like they had gone by literally in the blink of an eye. And when I was in that other experience in heaven, I realized how unimportant all this nonsense and noise is. One of the things the angels acknowledged is that life on earth is hard for some people, harder for others, harder for some than others. That was very comforting. I mean, they recognized it'd been a hard 59 years. And the thing with my husband, I mean, you know, finding the one you think is your soulmate, and then he does this, it's enough to mess up anybody. But this went on and on. I mean, I was gone for more than 10 minutes, closer to 15. And yet in that experience, I can't say, I mean, it could have been 2 days. It just went on and on and on and on and on. And then suddenly I was not in that black place floating. Now I was in a white room and I was on my own 2 feet. And it was like a mist or a fog that was falling. And the room had walls and ceiling, and in front of me, about 15 feet in front of me, there was a door, and it was closed. Well, one of the things that happened on the way to the door was this mist was actually swirling around me. It was like a dance. It wasn't just like a fog falling on me. It was like a dance swirling around me. And I remember one of the things that happened was I looked at the mist and I tried to look at an individual droplet of vapor. And if you think about that next time you're in a fog, looking at an individual droplet, saying, hey, what does that one droplet look like? You realize it's nuts, but I feel like I should be able to focus on it. This was different. And the angel that was accompanying me said, your eyes have not acclimated to this new environment, but this is not droplets of vapor. These are particles of light. And you were being cleansed and prepared for heaven. And she explained to me that some people become they identify so deeply with the disease process that they forget that it's no part of their spiritual identity. It's no part of their God-given nature. And so they have to have the way it was explained to me, the muck of the earth washed off them, like a spiritual car wash before you go to heaven. And in this process, one of the things that was explained to me was if I agreed to go back, or not even agreed, if I decided to go back to earth, I would be restored to wholeness. And I thought, yeah, good to know, not interested. I was supposed to start chemo and radiation immediately. I was going to have 6 weeks of daily radiation, 5 days a week, and 1 a week dose of chemo. And I didn't want any part of that. I was afraid. I actually thought, well, I was just very nervous about those hard drugs. I'd never taken drugs. I'd always relied on prayer for healing. So I thought, well, you know what? No need to worry about deciding about that chemo because that has ceased to be a problem here. And the angels did talk to me as I moved toward that door. And I kept thinking, that's okay, got it, noted, but I don't want to go back. And then as I got to the door, I put my right hand up to push through this door. I paused and I said, is this the divine will for my life that a medical mistake sends me on to my reward? And before I could get to, is this the divine? The answer was no. But whatever you decide, you go with all of God's blessings and grace and mercy and care and love. There isn't a wrong decision. I was like, wow, good to know. I thought it was amazing. There isn't a wrong decision. You know, all those prayers about I have decision fatigue, I can't handle it anymore. God was saying, not a problem. Not a problem. Whatever you decide, you'll be richly blessed. So As I proceeded again to get through that door, I was shown a vision of the nurse who had provided such motherly comfort to me as I was on that gurney before I passed out at the little ER. But this time, that nurse was sitting in an ER supply room, in a hospital supply room, surrounded by medical supplies and linens and, all the stuff we use in medical care. But she was sitting in the middle of the room, sitting on a little metal stool, leaning forward, head in her hands, and sobbing uncontrollably, and saying through tears, "I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I've lost her." And I thought, ugh. And then I thought, you know what? She's about my age. She's lost patience before. She'll get over this. But then I wasn't just in the room with her observing, but I was given her pain, her grief, her sadness, her regret, her misery. And it hit me hard right in the solar plexus. And I thought, I recognize that grief and that regret and that sadness. And if I can spare one person on this earth that much pain, I guess I have to go back. And in a millisecond, I was back in that room, except I was in a new room. Once you die, you get the better room. They transferred me to a bigger cubicle, had a door, and I woke up, and I think everybody in the ER was in that room. My buddy who had helped me through this, he said, yeah, they even called in the receptionist to squeeze the IV bags. He said everyone was working on you. And he said, the first thing I remember, and memory can be fickle, especially when you died from blood loss. The first thing I remember was looking up and seeing the nurse or somebody was literally squeezing IVs into me. But then there was an angel in the upper left corner of the room, between where the wall meets the ceiling. And I said, Robert's Rules of Order here. We had a first, we didn't have a second. We never made it to the discussion phase about this whole coming back to Earth thing. Do you know how much energy and effort it took to go through the dying process? And here I am back. And something I've learned about angels is they do not answer questions they don't want to. She just kind of looked at me and, hi there. And she was not a female form. She was, I know this sounds crazy, but she was like a ball of light, just energetic, sparkly light. But she was very clear in her communication. And she said, yeah, hey, hi there. Yeah, you're here. Huh, you got your back. I was like, oh. So then, the other interesting thing is once you die in an ER and they have to bring you back, they have to resuscitate you. They can't wait to get you out of there. They had an ambulance at the back door. They loaded me in that ambulance, and off we went to a trauma-level hospital in the blink of an eye. They were like, yep, she's breathing. Get her out of here. And I was being loaded into that ambulance, and I thought to myself, my whole life I've been reading about these NDEs, and I had one. It was nothing like I read about. Nothing. I thought it was going to be very different. It was nothing. And then once they loaded me into the ambulance, I had a big angel in that ambulance, and I mean like otherworldly spiritual being. And she kept telling me funny stories. Every time I would laugh, I would take that oxygen mask and pull it off my face and put it on my chin so I could laugh better. And after about 3 times, the attendant who was back there with me took it off my chin and snapped it back on. And he said, stop that. You need oxygen. So we went to a hospital and they took care of me. And I was in there for 4 days. My friends would stay with me in the hospital during the time that I was hospitalized. And every now and then they'd have to go leave the room for a minute or go get lunch or something. And when they left, the angels would appear. I can't say they came in. They would appear at my bed on 3 sides, at the foot and the 2 sides of the bed, and they would sing to me. And they sang the most beautiful songs. Just beautiful tonal quality songs. And their songs glorified God. And they were dressed in light. They wore, the best I can describe it is like beads. Back in the day we used to hang beads on our door. This was, I guess, the 70s, and it'd be like 3/4 of an inch of filament and a bead, and 3/4 of an inch and a bead. And that's kind of what they were dressed in. These beads, the more they sang, the more brilliant they became. And they were just so full of light and again, beautiful energy. And all their songs glorified God. And I said to them, look, I am really good with memorizing images, because my background was architectural history. I said, I'm really good with memorizing images. I said, music, not so much. I'm not going to be able to remember the melody or the words, and I really want to. And, somebody told me later, they said, that's because you were trying to intellectualize this experience. I thought, yep, I was. But they said, this is not for you to remember. This is for your peace. This is for your healing. And this is a thank you for agreeing to come back. And they said, then we know that life on earth is hard. We know that was a hard choice to agree to come back here. And it's, again, that's one of the most common comments I get in my emails is that the angels know this is hard. Even though dying feels like waking up from a bad dream, you don't really know that until you're at the end, which is kind of unfair. So, when I first went into that hospital, I had a lot of weird pain in my abdominal area. And it wasn't really pain, it was discomfort. So here I am, fresh back from heaven, and I'm still having discomfort in this midsection of my body. And I asked the angels, I said, am I going to die again? Did we go through all this falderall so I can be dead by the end of the week? What's going on? And they said, no. They said, we're still fixing things. They said, you're still in a healing process. And I accepted that. I got out of the hospital and I went home. I had to go back to that oncologist. And I said, good news, I've been healed. I went to heaven, I was healed. And he wrote mentally ill in my chart. That was his reaction. I declined chemo and radiation. I never had one session of that. I declined it. And I had to go find another oncologist. And I actually had to travel about 50 miles, had to go to another part of the state to find somebody who would even take the case. Because if they said, if the great Dr. blah blah says you need this, you need this. I'm not taking this case. So I actually had to find a young doctor. And she said, do you know what this will do to my career? If you're wrong and you die of cancer, or this gets so advanced it can't be treated. And I said, do you know what it's going to do to my life if I'm wrong? I'm not worried about your career. I'd like to stay alive for a bit. But she did the surgery. She did another surgical biopsy just to be sure. And she said, you're right. She said, we examined a lot of flesh in a lot of places, and there's not one cell of cancer on you. It's gone. I was told that it would take 2 to 3 months to recover because the bone marrow takes 2 to 3 months to recover from a catastrophic blood loss like that. And I told a friend of mine who was praying for me about this, and he said, we'll just see about that. Well, I had blood work done 15 days after the day that I had died. And the doctor, you get the results back, and I met with the doctor, and she looks at it, she says, I see there's a problem with your blood work. I said, what? She said, there's a mistake. It's textbook perfect. I said, no, there's no mistake. I'm back. I'm riding my bike again. I'm out walking. I said, all that breathlessness and passing out's gone. I feel fine. She said, you're riding your bike? I said, yeah, it's great. Slowly. So yeah, in 15 days, all of it was reversed, and I was perfectly healthy. And that's pretty dramatic. That's pretty impressive. And that was a spiritual healing. And the thing that kind of cooked my noodle on that whole deal was my body was on that gurney in that little ER. It was my spirit, my soul, my essence that went to heaven. And yet that's where the healing happened, was in my soul. The other thing that happened was I was freed of all that guilt. I was told that the thing that my husband did was horrible and dark and scary, but it had been encapsulated, and it wasn't ever going to leak out, and it was a thing, and it had happened, but it wasn't ever going to hurt me again. It had lost its power. And the angel said, I've been asking the wrong questions. I always used to say, I loved him so much, how could he do this to me? And the angel said, don't say that anymore. You loved. Love is never wasted. Love is not something that goes somewhere and goes in a trash heap. You loved. And you loved him. And that love is still alive. Love is a living thing. And I learned so many things about how to forgive myself and how to let it go and to let him work out his own salvation and for me to focus on my salvation. And it really is none of my business where he's gone, what he's doing, how he is. I need to focus on the people on this earth, which includes, my daughters and lots of other people. I just want people to have peace. So if there's a reason I came back, I hope that's it. I hope somebody hears the story and says, if she got through this, maybe I can too.